In life, there are often two paths we can take. One is enticing because it's easy, it's safe, it's comfortable, but it's also boring and ultimately leads to nowhere. And in the end, everything you hoped for vanishes. The other path, it's not comfortable, it can be risky, but this path leads to adventure and ultimately to a life of meaning and purpose. The question is, which path are you choosing? Welcome to the Dad Ventures podcast. Most dads know they should lead their family, but don't feel qualified. At the Dad Ventures, we provide dads with tools and training so they can confidently lead their family to journey with Jesus. I'm your host, Michael Parks. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am so glad you have chosen to join me here on this journey. It's been a little bit of a couple weeks of chaos with the flu and a ton of snow days here. So I am really excited to be back with all of you. Let's dive right in. Let's start with Jesus. John chapter 8, verse 12. John chapter 8, verse 12 from the New International Version. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Do you ever feel like you're walking through life with the lights turned off? Don't know where you're going. Don't know where you're supposed to be going. And even if you did know, you wouldn't know how to get there. You just can't see life clearly. Or maybe, you're just struggling with some important decisions and it seems like there's no clarity. You just can't see far enough down the road. But Jesus declares, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." If you want to know where to go in life, if you want to have clarity and purpose in life, follow Jesus. He came to the world to bring light and to bring truth and understanding and wisdom and to illuminate the path of life that leads to the Father. Jesus is the light that guides us. And we may not always be able to see around every twist and turn what's coming up, but if we trust and follow Jesus, he will guide us through every challenge, every obstacle, and he will lead us to true, everlasting life. So, set your eyes and your heart on Jesus. And no matter what you face in life, Jesus will illuminate your path and lead you to joy, and to victory, and to life. All right. Do you guys remember those choose your own adventure books? Now, when I was a kid, I used to love reading those choose your own adventure books. I loved the idea of actually getting to choose what decision to make in the story because it really made me feel like I'm in the story. And then a few years ago, it was super cool to see Bear Grylls do a choose your own adventure show on Netflix. My boys love it because they can choose all these different decisions. What should Bear do? And I think the reason that we like them is that it makes us feel like we're in the story. We're part of it. We get to experience the adventure. And I believe all of us want to be part of an exciting story. Now, several years ago, I read a book by Donald Miller called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years, What I Learned While Editing My Life. Now, if you don't know who Donald Miller is, he was a great author. When I was in college, he had a book called Blue Like Jazz that was super popular. And several years later, they actually turned it into a movie. And during that time, it was kind of an interesting choice to of a book to turn into a movie, because it wasn't really a narrative. It was really more a series of essays and reflections that Donald Miller had, from growing up and being a young adult. And so this book, A Million Miles in a Thousand Years, is actually a reflection on that process of turning Blue Like Jazz into a movie, because he had to edit his life. And he talks about just this weird dynamic, this weird thing going on where, he's meeting with the screenwriters, and they're saying, hey, we need to change this because this doesn't make for a good story. And Donald Miller's going, what do you mean? This is my life. This isn't a story. Like, well, it's just not a good story. And that really kind of messed with him, that, this is his life. And he's got these storytellers who are saying, your life does not make for a good story. We need to spice it up a little bit. We need to change some things. And so that's what this book is, A Million Miles in a Thousand Years. It's him reflecting on that process of editing his life and trying to turn it into a good story. And at the beginning of the book, he wrote this, and I'm going to read it for you because this had a huge impact just from the very beginning of the book, and a huge impact on my life and the way I view life. He writes this: if you watched a movie about a guy who wanted a Volvo and worked for years to get it, you wouldn't cry at the end when he drove off the lot, testing the windshield wipers. You wouldn't tell your friends you saw a beautiful movie or go home and put a record on to think about the story you'd seen. The truth is, you wouldn't remember that movie a week later, except you'd feel robbed and want your money back. Nobody cries at the end of a movie about a guy who wants a Volvo. But we spend years actually living those stories and expect our lives to be meaningful. The truth is, if what we choose to do with our lives won't make a story meaningful, it won't make a life meaningful either. Ouch. That hit me so hard, right in the gut. I mean, it really made me reflect on my own life and the story that I was living. Was I living the kind of adventurous story that I would want to read? Or was I living a boring, ordinary story with no adventure and ultimately no meaning? Guys, I don't want to settle for ordinary. I don't want to settle for average. I don't want to settle for comfortable. I want a life of adventure and purpose. But that means that I have to choose it. I have to choose adventure. I have to make a conscious decision to pursue purpose. I can't just sit back and let life happen to me. And I can't pursue safety and comfort and expect to live a story of adventure and meaning. So, when it comes to the part of the story where I get to choose my own adventure, where I can choose a path that leads to comfort or a path that leads to adventure, I'm choosing adventure. I am choosing to live a better story. But what about you? What kind of story are you living? What kind of story are you choosing? Jesus invites us to live a better story. He invites us into a better story, a better life, a life of adventure and meaning and purpose. And that is the life that I want. That is the story I want to be part of. Now, I imagine that this is probably the same decision that the first disciples faced when Jesus said, "Follow me," to Peter and Andrew. They probably looked at their boat and they looked at Jesus, and it probably took them a second to kind of figure it out. Which path am I going to choose? Which adventure? I look at the boat and it's comfortable. It's familiar. It's what we know. It's the good and the bad. We know it both, right? It provides a living, maybe not a good one, but hey, it's a living. But, is this all that there is? Is this all there is to our life? Just every morning, get up early, set sail, catch fish, sell a fish, clean and repair the nets, go home, eat fish, go to bed, get up in the morning, and do it all over again every morning. until we die. And then we look at Jesus over here. It's adventure and risk. It's not comfortable, and it's for sure not familiar. Something completely new. All kinds of questions. How are we going to make a living? How are we going to provide for ourselves and our family? What are we going to eat? But there's purpose, and there's meaning, and there's also belonging and acceptance. You see, as Jewish boys, they would have gone to school at the local synagogue. But as they grew a little bit older, eventually the rabbi would have told them, hey, you know what? It's time for your studies to end. The rabbi didn't believe that they showed enough promise to continue studying. So it's just go home, learn your father's trade. In essence, they were rejected by the rabbi. But then this new rabbi, Jesus, comes along and says, I want you to follow me. I believe in you. You are good enough. And I'm inviting you into a new and better life of purpose and adventure with me. I accept you. You belong here. And Matthew chapter 4, verse 20 says that at once Peter and Andrew left their nets and followed him. And then a few verses later, we see the same scenario repeated with another set of brothers who were also fishermen. James and John do the exact same thing. Matthew 4:22 says that immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. They left their dad sitting in the boat and went and followed Jesus. A life of adventure and purpose. Now, before you think that it's just because they were poor fishermen that they chose to follow Jesus, that hey, it can't be worse to follow Jesus. If that's what you're thinking, just take a look at Matthew's story. Matthew, who's also called Levi, was a tax collector, and he had become wealthy by basically selling out his own people to go to work for the Roman government. See, Roman tax collectors were notorious for overcharging people and then pocketing the extra. And when Matthew looked at the two paths, the path that he was on led to wealth and to a comfortable life. But the path to Jesus would mean, giving up that wealthy life. Now, I don't know how long it took Matthew to reach his decision. It doesn't say immediately or at once, but I do know that he chose the path of adventure, the path of purpose, the path of Jesus. And he's the one who actually wrote these stories down in the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew chapter 9, verse 9, he writes this about his own story. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. Jesus invited these men into a better story. And Jesus is also inviting you and me into that better story. But choosing adventure in real life is hard. It's a lot harder than in a choose your own adventure book, because choosing adventure in real life, there's real risk and there's real sacrifice and there's real hard work. It reminds me of a story from early on in our marriage. At the time, we only had two kids. Our oldest was 5 and our youngest was just a year old. And this is 2 years before we set our goal to get all of our kids to all 50 states. We were on vacation. We were going on vacation to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, the Great Smoky Mountains, right? And now in everyday life, I'm pretty laid back, kind of spontaneous, and go with the flow. But my wife is very detail oriented, to-do lists, schedules. Now, over the years, we've kind of rubbed off on each other a little bit. But again, this was still pretty early on in our marriage, so that hadn't quite happened yet. But on vacation, we switch, we flip-flop. I become type A. I plan everything out. I come up with a detailed itinerary because I don't want to miss out on anything. I'm spending hours and hours researching restaurants and sightseeing and hikes and all the things and the history and what we need to do and all the things that I want to experience. My wife, on the other hand, It's like the only time she relaxes. So on vacation, she just goes into relaxation mode, right? She's just carefree. Doesn't really plan a thing. Doesn't even really care what the plan is. She doesn't care. She's on vacation. She's relaxing. Now, my wife is also very much a beach girl, while I tend to be more of a mountain man. Now, again, we've rubbed off on each other a little bit over the years, but especially back then, the beach was definitely calling her. Now, on our vacation, I've got everything planned out. And one of those days that I had planned out was to go over to Asheville, North Carolina, just about an hour and a half from Gatlinburg. Now, while we're in Asheville, my beach-loving wife looks at me and says, "Hey, North Carolina, that touches the ocean, right?" Now, I was a little naive back then. I didn't really realize what my water-obsessed wife was getting at. So the geography nerd in me says, yeah, it's on the ocean, but North Carolina is a really long state. So the ocean is probably, it's still probably pretty far, like at least 6 hours from where we are in Asheville. Well, look it up, and it's actually like 7 to 8 hours, depending on which beach you go to. Now, I should have probably stopped there, but geography nerd Michael goes on to say, but you know what? The coast cuts inward at South Carolina, so that's probably closer. This, my wife's eyes get a little bit bigger with excitement. I'm in trouble. We look it up. Charleston, South Carolina, it's only about 4 hours from Asheville. My wife's eyes get even bigger. As my middle school son would say, I'm cooked. She looks at me with excitement. Can we go? Oh, no. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Now, we can't go today. Like, we don't have time. Absolutely not. It's already halfway through the day, and we're not prepared for this. But, like the disciples and that Choose Your Own Adventure book, I've got a big decision to make. Right? I can stick with the safe plan and disappoint my wife, or I can choose this adventure that's going to make my wife happy, but it's going to be a whole lot of work, especially for me. Gatlinburg is, 10 hours from our house in Missouri. So we brought stuff for the mountains. We brought hiking stuff, not beach stuff. We don't have anything for the beach other than swimsuits that we brought for the indoor pool. But we don't have beach towels. We don't have beach chairs. We don't have an umbrella. I don't even think we have sunscreen. And it would mean having to rearrange my itinerary that I worked so hard on, because this is going to take an entire day. It's 5 to 6 hour drive one way from Gatlinburg to Charleston, South Carolina. We would have to get up so early in the morning, and then we'd have to drive all morning with 2 little kids, spend a few hours at the beach, and then drive back all night and get back so late. 11 hours in the car with 2 little kids in the middle of our vacation does not sound fun. We would spend more than twice as much time driving than we would actually spend at the beach. But it would make my wife so happy to go to the beach. And our kids, I know they would have the time of their life. And I know it would make for an incredible memory. So as my wife is looking at me with her beautiful blue eyes, waiting for my response, I'm trying to think through all the logistics. Can we actually make this work? Do I even want to make this work? See, in that moment, I was encountering the 3 enemies, the 3 big enemies that every dad faces. First of all, I was facing apathy because I don't really care about the beach. It's fine, but I'd rather be in the mountains, especially at this time, right? It's going to be a lot of work, and I don't really want to go through all of that. It would just be easier to just stick with my plan. I'd feel more comfortable staying with what I know, what's familiar. I've already got the plan in place. And then inadequacy. Like, we're not we're not equipped for this. I'm not prepared. We don't have the resources. We don't have towels. We don't have an umbrella. We don't have sunscreen. And I've never even been to South Carolina. It's not like, oh yeah, I know where to go. I know what beach to go. No, I don't know any of that. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. And then conflicting priorities, right? Because I already have a plan. I've got the day scheduled out. I've got a hike planned. My plans are good. Yeah, maybe the beach would be better, but what if it's not? What if it's worse? And it's going to be so much extra work. And I've already done a bunch of work to make the plans we already have. I don't want to have to rearrange everything. But I know my wife really wants to go. And our kids would be so excited. And I know it's going to be such a great memory for our whole family if we do this. So here is how I countered those three enemies. Apathy, right? I might not care about the beach that much, but my family does. And I care about my family. They are worth getting out of my comfort zone and out of my apathy. They're worth it. Adventure is greater than apathy. Adventure is a great way to get out of my apathy. I might not care about the beach, but I care about my family. Inadequacy. Yeah, I'm not equipped for this, but we can figure it out. Yeah, I've done it before, and it's never as hard as I think. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it probably won't be perfect, but you know what? They've got a Walmart, and we can get what we need there. And then conflicting priorities. I had to ask myself, what's more important, my plans or creating joy for my family? Even though I schedule out an itinerary for our trips and I try to pack in as much as possible, I always try to leave just a little bit of wiggle room to be spontaneous if something else comes up. So, you know what? Yeah, we can shift some things around. We can make it work. So I tell her, okay, I guess we could rearrange some stuff and we could go the day after tomorrow. But we don't have anything that we need for the beach, and I don't think they sell beach stuff in Gatlinburg, so we're going to have to buy a bunch of stuff when we get there. Guys, she was so excited. Of course, meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out all the things that I'm going to have to do to rearrange and get in order to make this happen. But you know what? Even though I had my sights set on hiking in the mountains, I was still a little bit excited too. I mean, I do actually love the beach. And living in Missouri, we don't get to go to the beach very often. And my family, they were going to be so excited. And we were going to make a great memory. Adventure is greater than apathy. I always want to choose adventure. But sometimes, I just need a little bit of a push to do so. And I'm always glad when I do choose adventure. So 2 days later, we get up super early. We leave the hotel in Gatlinburg at 4:30 in the morning. We drive 5.5 hours straight to Charleston, find a Walmart. We buy beach towels, beach chairs, an umbrella, beach bags, some beach toys, and sunscreen. Found a great sandwich shop near the beach on Yelp. Get some lunch there. Take it to Folly Beach. And, this is the first time that the kids and I have seen the Atlantic Ocean. So that's such a cool experience. And then we just have a wonderful picnic lunch on the beach with the waves rolling in. We're having so much fun playing. Our little 1-year-old, he's digging in the sand, making mud and just throwing it everywhere. Our daughter is just so giddy with excitement seeing the waves. They're both playing together. They're building sand castles. They're splashing in the water. They have the best day ever. And then my wife, I look over and she's just sitting there with the most relaxed, content smile on her face. She is in her happy place. And guess who the hero of the day is? That's right, buddy, Dad. We spent several hours at the beach, and we packed it all up, drove all night back to Gatlinburg, got there at midnight, put the kids to sleep, and created an amazing memory for our family. Now, was it easy? No. But was it worth it? Definitely. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Because that's probably the biggest memory from that vacation. If we had stuck with my original plan for the day, we probably wouldn't remember it. In fact, I don't remember what my original plan was supposed to be. And we wouldn't be talking about it 10 years later. And it also, it helps spark an adventurous spirit within our family. Because if we can just throw in a beach vacation in the middle of a mountain vacation and drive 10, 11 hours to the beach and back in one day, man, we can do anything, right? So now whenever there's an opportunity for adventure, an opportunity to experience something new or something different, I think back to that moment and I choose the path of adventure. And just 2 years later is when we go on our epic 54-hour road trip to Yellowstone, where we set that goal to get our kids to all 50 states. And that was a big part of it because, hey, we checked off South Carolina already. So that helped spark more adventure within our lives. Now, you might be asking, okay, Michael, what in the world does this have to do with following Jesus? Good question. Well, first, even though I know this example wasn't specifically about following, Jesus and answering his call to follow him, it still serves as a great example of what that looks like. There's the call to adventure. There's the risks and the obstacles and the challenges and the enemies that you encounter when you follow that path to adventure. And then how to overcome those enemies and those challenges. And then gaining that reward of adventure. And then second, the more you choose adventure, the more you will choose adventure, right? When you choose adventure now, it becomes easier to choose adventure in the future. Even when the adventure isn't directly related to following Jesus, when you choose to be more adventurous in life, whether that's traveling or trying new foods or starting a new hobby or learning a new skill, whatever it is, it makes it easier to choose the adventure of following Jesus. Because the hardest part of an adventure is the choice to go on an adventure. It's taking that first step. Because, our brains, they come up with all kinds of excuses as to why we shouldn't choose adventure. Whether the adventure is going to the beach or the adventure is inviting a friend or neighbor to church. In either case, those voices of anxiety and fear and what if we listen to them, they keep us from experiencing something great, something extraordinary. But when we choose adventure, we realize that, it's not as scary as we imagined. And when we choose adventure, we learn what to do in those situations where we aren't in our comfort zone. And we experience the thrill and excitement of adventure. Even when adventure doesn't go the way I plan it, even when it really doesn't even work out, because sometimes it doesn't, I'm still glad that I chose adventure. Because I know that it's going to make it easier for me to choose adventure the next time. And because I always learn something about adventure and about life and about God and about myself. Guys, Jesus is inviting you to choose adventure. He's inviting you into a better story. He is calling you to follow him to true life. Life with meaning and purpose. Guys, don't settle for ordinary. Choose extraordinary instead. Choose adventure with Jesus. So here's what I want you to do. Number one, start by choosing adventure in the little moments. You always order the same thing at a restaurant? Order something different next time. No joke. While I was working on this episode, I went to a coffee shop to write, and the lady at the register said, "You always get the Americano, right?" No. I cannot be one of those guys who always gets the same thing, right? The truth is, I I mean, maybe for the last couple of months, I'd been getting an Americano because it was cheaper, because they raised prices on the other things. But I'm like, no, not today. You know what? Give me a cappuccino instead. Guys, change up your order. Order something different. Choose adventure. Maybe you find your family, you always do the same thing on family night, right? You've got a Friday night or Saturday night and you order pizza and you watch a movie. Do something different. Be adventurous. Get out of the house. Go for a hike. Go play pickleball. Go try a new restaurant. Go to a new park. Do an escape room. Choose adventure. Choose adventure in these little moments, and it will help you choose adventure in the future, in the bigger moments. And you know what? It also helps your kids to learn to choose adventure for themselves and how to adapt to new challenges. If they're always doing the same thing, they never learn how to adapt and how to do things differently. So choose adventure. And then number 2, choose adventure with Jesus. Choose to live a better story with Jesus. Now, how do you know which path to choose? Here's a good rule of thumb. If the path leads to comfort, or the path leads, right back to where I am, which is, familiar and safe and easy, it's probably not the path of Jesus. But if the path involves risk and getting out of my comfort zone, that's probably a good sign that it is the path of Jesus. Because following Jesus requires faith. So spend time in God's word and in prayer, because the more you do that, the more wisdom and discernment you will receive. Following Jesus requires faith, and it's not just something that affects one part of my life. Following Jesus is my life. It's my time, my calendar, my energy, my finances, my career, my family, my friends. It's everything, every part of my life. Jesus' call to follow him is a call to learn from him and to become like him. You want to know what that looks like? Get in Scripture. Look at how Jesus lived his life and pray for God's Spirit to transform you to be more like him. This is something that I've really been working on in my own life, because it's not easy. It can be scary because it's adventure. The other day I was talking with another dad at a basketball game. Our sons play basketball together, and during our conversation, I felt the Holy Spirit kind of prodding me to steer the conversation towards spiritual matters. Now, that's not something that just comes very easy to me. I kind of resisted that a little bit. Because is it going to make things awkward? Am I going to screw things up? But I kept feeling that nudge. So I looked for an opportunity and brought up church in a way that fit the conversation. He said that they were going to a church that was a bit of a drive from where we live, and that made it hard to really make connections with other people. He said, that sometimes he wished that they had a church that was a little bit closer so his kids could be involved and they could have friends at church. So I said, well, hey, you know what? Your son should come with my son, Bennett, to our middle school nights on Wednesdays, because he loves it. And there's a ton of middle school students, and he would actually know a bunch of them from school and from basketball. And I lead one of the small groups. He said, well, hey, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I'll talk to him, see what he thinks. Well, so the next night, we're praying about it as a family. The next day, I get an email from him wanting more details about Wednesday night. So I sent him some more details. He writes back that his son will be there on Wednesday. And he was. And I asked him, he had a great time, and he said he'll be back next week. He absolutely loved it. Now, if I had stayed with what is comfortable and easy, I would have missed out on being part of this story that God is writing, and so would he. I would have missed out on the adventure. But instead, I get to be part of this adventurous story. Now, I don't know where this story will end up going with this family, but I do know the author of the story. And I'm going to continue to trust and follow him. So I urge you, choose adventure with Jesus. Choose to live a better story with him. In this life, you get to choose your own adventure. But what are you going to choose? Are you going to settle for safe, boring, ordinary? Or are you going to choose the path of Jesus that's risky, but leads to adventure and extraordinary and leads to true life? Choose the adventure of Jesus. Thanks for listening to the Dad Ventures podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and share it with another dad. We're building a community of strong dads leading strong families to Jesus.